started.
Okay. So hopefully, well, I'm sure a few of you have heard of, have come across my work. And Waleed invited me to talk about improving your scientific writing rather than statistics, which is fine with me. I do a lot of writing. I'm a professor at BYU in Utah. And I do a lot of writing. In fact, I've published 142 papers in the past 8 years. In 29 journals and in 14 different disciplines. So I've published a lot. That actually works out, I did the math, works out to about 1 publication every 3 weeks, which it turns out is a lot. Yeah. But this also means that I've probably doubled that number of submissions and rejections, probably in the 200s for rejections. I got 2 rejections this week. So that's great. I'm going to turn those around and submit them elsewhere. But to publish that much, you need to submit that much, or quite a bit more than that much, actually, because you'll get some rejections. I definitely get more rejections than acceptances, which is a good experience. It's a learning experience. I'm a senior editor at JAIS, one of the top journals in my field, and I'm on their editorial board, their ERB editorial review board. I'm an associate editor at Frontiers in Psychology and at AIS-THCI, another journal in my field. My field, by the way, is information systems. I do a lot in psychology and marketing and others, but my field is information systems with a focus on human-computer interaction. I am a track chair at our top conference at the Paperathon. A Paperathon, it's like a hackathon, but where you build papers together. And so you have a group of people come together who have never met, and some come with data, some come with skills, and some come with just desire. And you write a paper together in 24 hours. And you pitch it to a bunch of editors like Shark Tank, and they sort of bid on it and decide who gets to submit the paper to which journal. It's pretty cool. But it's taught me a lot of how to put together a paper quickly. I mean, what makes a good paper. I'm always reviewing. I always have a few reviews on my plate, probably a few dozen every year. Let's see. I'm associate editor at all our major conferences, and I'm a doctoral advisor for dozens of students. So I've done a lot in terms of writing. I have some experience there. I'm getting a lot of echo from somebody. If it'd be okay, unless you're talking, if you could mute your mics, that would be great. Let's see. Hopefully that worked. Okay. Yeah, I'm not getting the echo anymore. Excellent. So all this experience is to show I've done a lot of stuff relative to academic writing, scientific writing. I'm involved on the editorial side and the review side, as well as a lot of writing myself. And then non-academically, I have 4 daughters. I've started 6 companies, and I work about 30 hours per week, which means I've got to really focus on how I do my work, or else I end up working too much. Working more than about 6 hours a day is just exhausting. And working on a Saturday like today is unheard of. So you got me, despite me not usually working on a Saturday. I'd like to know about you a bit. This won't take long. There is a Zoom poll. Let's see. And I can somehow share it. Here it is. Launch polling. I just sent everybody a poll. I don't know how that works, but I know that there are polls. Maybe it showed up on your screen. And I'd like you to answer that poll if you can. Does anyone see it? Did it show up?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Good. Cool, getting some responses.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Doctor.
We're just taking a poll.
I'm sorry, the sound is stopped.
My sound is stopped? Can anyone hear me?
Yes,
My
we hear
voice
you.
is clear from Iraq.
Yes, it's clear, but I think
good.
you are talking.
Ooh, honking. Okay.
I think it's now is okay. Good. Okay.
Oh, good, good. Okay, looks like we have 42 responses on this poll. I'll just wait for a few more here, just get good representation. So it looks like we have, surprising to me, mostly undergrad and master's students. That's very surprising to me. I guess outside of the US, undergrad and masters do a lot of research. In the United States, not so much. Doctoral students, that doesn't surprise me, about a quarter of us. Doctoral candidate, 19%, good. Assistant professors, associate, we have a full professor here? Cool. I'm not even a full professor, not yet. Hopefully in the next few years. Other, what's the other? Maybe a professional. Or not a student, maybe. Let's see, scientific pubs, a lot have none, 1 to 5, 5 to 10. A few of you have more than 120. Yeah, way to go. Good stuff. See, what roles do you currently have? We have some editors, a lot of reviewers, other editorial roles. Not sure what that is, but I just put it there. We have an editor-in-chief here. Oh, cool, or 2 of them. Let's see, getting a lot of feedback. I'm gonna mute you, Walid. Research, business, social sciences, not business, hard sciences. Huh, cool. I always wanted to publish in the hard sciences. Don't know what I do though. And then research approach, experimental, archival, survey, and qualitative. Good stuff. Hopefully what I say today really doesn't depend on your field or your research approach. What I'm talking about is just writing. So hopefully it'll just be relevant to everybody. I'm going to close this poll now. End polling. Cool. So thanks for letting me get to know you. That helps me target my comments a little bit more. The thing I'm going to talk about most, getting feedback from someone. There we go. The thing I'm going to talk about most is essentially coming up with good research problems and validating them early so that you don't make the mistake of doing a lot of research in the wrong path, in a path that's just going to lead to rejection. There's a paper about this called Avoiding Type 3 Errors. We know type 1, you got false positives, type 2, false negatives. Type 3 is false science, having bad research questions. That's something we want to avoid at all costs. And so there's a paper about this by Arun Rai. It's published in MIS Quarterly, one of the top business journals. It's in the Fortune, FT50, whatever that stands for. It's in the top business journals. There's a link there. It's free to download as far as I know. And it talks about coming up with good research questions and not coming up with questions that will be rejected. And it's specific to information systems, my field, but the principles are generalizable to everyone's field. So one thing I've done as a doctoral advisor and also as I'm the chair of the pre-PhD master's program at BYU in the business school. It's where we prepare graduate students to go do a PhD. One thing I get asked a lot is how to develop a good problem to pursue. And so I put on the stat wiki how to start every research project by listing or by filling out these 6 questions. And if you can fill out these 6 questions, essentially just in a bullet abstract, then you'll have a pretty good idea of what your problem is and whether it's worth pursuing. So I'm going to talk about each of these in turn. Again, these slides are available. I put it in the chat window at the very, very top. You'll find it. It's also just on the stat wiki at this link right here. If you go to this link, you'll see the slides already posted there. So the first question you need to ask when you're writing a paper or when you have a project idea is, what is the problem you're seeking to address? You have to have a problem. One fallacy we make in academia is we think something's interesting and therefore it's worth pursuing. But it's hard to publish something that's just interesting. So if there's no problem, usually it's hard to get backing for the research if you're in a funded field. It's also hard to get editorial interest if there's no problem. Why do the research if there's no problem? Another fallacy, especially younger scholars tend to make, is they'll state that the problem is that we don't understand this area enough, or it hasn't been researched enough. That is not a problem. That is a gap. That is a gap in research. And often gaps are there for a reason, because there isn't any good reason to publish or to research those gaps. That's not always the case, but a gap cannot be the only problem. There must be a problem in addition to a gap in research. Don't fall into that trap. So there's got to be both. Very often, as an editor, I'll get a paper and they will never state a problem. It will just be, we don't understand enough, or there hasn't been enough research done in this area. I always send those papers back before sending them out to reviewers and say, you need to find a problem. Otherwise, what's the motivation for doing this research? Also, another common problem when writing, first off, we have trouble defining our problem, but we'll start writing anyway. And what happens is we end up having multiple problems we're trying to tackle at once, because we're experts in this area, right? Otherwise, why are we writing the research? Or we're becoming experts, at least. And one thing we'll do is we'll have all these problems in the field. We've read all these papers and we've done all this research, and we can see all the problems in the field, and we try to tackle them all at once. And we can't do that. It ends up bloating your paper. You have really long papers that are hard to follow, and it's hard to know what the study that has been designed is addressing and what the findings actually imply when there are multiple problems. So my strong recommendation is, when you're writing up the problem, make sure it's just one problem. This works to your advantage as well. If you're able to publish on this one problem, then you're also able to follow that up with the other problems, and you can publish multiple papers. You can publish multiple papers on a single data set even. You might collect data on all these problems, but then just publish one paper at a time off of that data set. I have a data set from, it's not even my data set. My advisor, when I went through my PhD, Kalle Lutinen, he collected data back in 2001. And he's probably published, I don't know, 10 papers in top journals just on this one data set. But he didn't try to tackle them all in one paper, and that worked to his advantage. So that's find a problem. Make sure that problem is defined. Also, when you're coming up with a problem, you need to justify why that problem is important. It can't just be interesting. Again, it has to be an important problem, and it has to be a contemporary problem. I received a paper as an editor, it was probably a year ago, and it was an amazing paper. It was written so well. The methods were phenomenal, just pristine, very rigorous. It was like 2 to 3 years of observations and interviews and additional quantitative data. It was very impressive. But the problem they were addressing wasn't contemporary. That problem had been addressed 30 years ago and resolved, essentially. There had been a lot of research in that area, and everything that they were trying to resolve had been resolved already. And so despite the beautiful research they had done, it just it didn't need to be done. And so it got rejected. It was really sad. They'd spent years on this, but there was nothing new. And so it's got to be contemporary. It's got to be a current problem. Let's see, we talked about that point. What makes something important? This is fairly subjective. So I've tried to quantify it a little bit. Important problems protect resources. That's one thing they do. They protect money, they protect people, any resource of your company or your organization, or it contributes to resources. So again, you can create money, more profit. You can create happier employees, more satisfied customers. It contributes to those resources. It can improve human experience. That's another way to contribute to resources. It could enable new opportunities in science or practice. So sometimes the problem we're trying to address isn't immediately practical, right? And that's the way science works quite often, is we aren't studying things always that are immediately implementable in practice. Often the things we're studying are the building blocks to something that will eventually be implementable in practice. And so if it enables new opportunities, even if that is just for new research, then that might be important if down the road we can see that there will be an important contribution. Or enabling new thinking. Quite often we don't know what problems need to be addressed because we haven't thought in a certain way before, or we haven't framed our mind or framed problems in the right way. And science is often good at coming up with theories that help us think differently to enable the generation of new problems that need to be addressed. So that could be important, enabling new thinking. Often old problems don't need to be readdressed. I mentioned that. There is value in replication research, but not so much in the social sciences. Well, there might not be rewards. There might be value, but there might not be rewards in the social sciences. When you replicate research in social sciences, it tends to get rejected because what's new, right? In the hard sciences, this is less the case. It's important to replicate, especially in medicine and in physics. But in the social sciences, replications usually don't get attention and they usually get rejected, sadly. So once you've found a problem and you've justified that this is an important problem, you need to figure out who else has addressed that problem. Because usually the answer isn't nobody. Usually somebody has addressed this problem in the past. You are not the first one to think of this, probably. There are rare occasions when you have this spark of enlightenment and you're the first to ever come up with this problem. But again, rarely is that the case. So go find out who's researched this before. And it might not be exactly your question. If you're studying, I think I might have a bullet point on this. If you're studying something very, very specific. In fact, I just did a study with a colleague in Nigeria who's working in Malaysia. He was studying creativity in higher education in Malaysia. I mean, this is a very, very specific problem. Has anyone ever studied that before? Maybe. Has anyone studied something like it? Yes, quite a few. And so you need to abstract just slightly outside of your own context and then find those who have studied that. And then once you find that research, you need to figure out what they missed. I think that's the next slide, actually. So here's another example. I study virtual reality quite a bit and augmented reality. This exact question I don't think has been studied in a Malaysian context, but there are theories that could inform that research. And there are people who have studied that dependent variable. What is my dependent variable here? Adoption, technology adoption. That has been studied extensively. So I need to find out what people have said on that topic. And then when I do, answer the next question, which is, well, in what ways were their researches and their studies incomplete? Because if they've covered your question, what are you studying that's new? Now, often you'll come up with a problem, you'll refine it, you'll justify it, you'll motivate it, and you'll find the research and you'll find that people have studied the exact problem or something very similar to what you're interested in. At that point, you don't give up. You try to figure out what they missed. or what they could have done that they didn't do, or what they just didn't have capacity to do. Find now the gaps. You've already found the problem. Now find the gaps in that research. And that's where you can focus your efforts if those gaps are important. So that's that, those points. We talked about replication. One gap I often see stated in submitted papers is that extant research is conflicting. There are inconsistencies in findings. And that's like the weakest of justification for gaps. There are going to be inconsistencies because of different contexts, because of different other variables included in the model. Muted, there we go. Okay. So saying that you're doing this research because there are inconsistencies in the findings of extant research, probably not good enough. You need to find another I'm going to mute you again. There you go. Unless you're trying to say something. If you're trying to, Islam Ali Al-Hedadi, if you were trying to say something important, go ahead and text it in our chat window, because it was coming through all muddy. So I've muted you. Okay. Ooh, okay, I think we're good. Okay. Let's see. Yes, public service announcement here. One thing I'll find in submitted papers is the authors will, when they're pointing out gaps, they'll often be a little too critical of extant researchers because they're trying to justify their own research. So they say, oh, you know, this group or this author, they totally missed this or neglected this, or they can't talk about this. You know, their research was essentially garbage is what it comes off like. You can't do that, because usually when an editor is trying to find reviewers for your paper, they will look to see who you cite, especially the people you say have missing or limited research. If you're basing your research off of that study, saying there's a gap in that study, they will have that author of that study be your reviewer. So you better be nice. Otherwise, that reviewer is going to be a little upset and make you walk your language back a little bit. All right. I'm just watching the chat. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. Okay. So those are the main things. These four things right here, these last four slides. If you can do that, these first four, you're in really good shape. And this is something I recommend you do for every problem you want to pursue, every research project you think you want to do. First, do these first four things. They will take you maybe an afternoon. They will take you maybe an afternoon, but they will save you weeks of research going down the wrong path. So please do these four first. Once you've figured out these four and maybe shared it with a senior colleague or someone you trust who you feel is smarter than you are. I do that with my research all the time. I send it to my buddy who's way smarter than I am with this stuff. And he usually says, oh yeah, that's stupid. Or, you know, here's why you shouldn't do this. Or here's a better way to do this. Or that's a great idea, but have you thought of this? Or have you seen this paper? And they'll usually expand my mind, because even in your own lit review, you're going to miss stuff. But do these first four. And once you have sort of validated this idea, then you can move on to the fifth and sixth, which are important details. Let me scroll down to that real quick. Here we go. So how are you going to go about filling those gaps in the research? This is all about study design. You've probably heard the saying, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To the researcher who knows SEM, every problem can be solved with SEM, right? Or to the researcher who's really good with surveys, every problem can be studied with surveys. Same applies for qualitative methods. And this is why you need to collaborate with other people. Get people who know different methods than you do and who have access to different populations than you do. and you'll be able to do much better research. You'll also usually find that the way you initially conceived of studying this problem maybe isn't the best way, and maybe requires multiple stages of study. One maybe that is qualitative, observations, interviews, something more exploratory than you had previously thought, and then maybe something more confirmatory, where once you have the findings from this exploratory research, you can then go and do a more generalizable quantitative approach. And then this is sometimes the downfall, right here, number 6. Even if you have a really important problem and it's valid and there's a gap in the research and you know how you're going to study it, can you get the data? I advise executive doctoral students quite often, and they have great ambitions. They want to study surgeons. They want to study CEOs. They want to study former presidents and Senate members and heads of state. And it's just not feasible. How do you study these people? They don't have time for your research. And if you're going to do something quantitative, you're not going to have enough sample size to do any real statistics. So make sure you can actually access the data you need. You might have to pare back your ambitions to collect data from a more accessible population. Lastly, and this is the end of my slides right here, if you want to prevent desk rejects, which are a total waste of time, although they are better than getting it through a few rounds and then getting rejected. But if you want to avoid the first desk reject, here's what I recommend. Get early feedback. So answer those 4 to 6 questions just in bullet points in 1 to 2 pages, and send that 1 to 2 pages to a colleague. And make sure you say in your email, this is bullet points, 1 to 2 pages. It'll take you 5 minutes to read, and get that feedback immediately. And since it's in bullet points, it's going to be easy for them to digest, easy for them to understand, and to ask you the right questions in return to help expand your thinking. Sometimes we're shy about our research. I remember when I first started as a professor, I thought, yes, I'm free. I can do my own research. I don't have to be under the thumb of my advisors, and I can do my own ideas, which are so much better than my advisor's ideas. And so I wrote a paper. I spent months writing this paper, just crafting it to perfection. It was poetry on paper, and at least in my mind. And I submitted it, and it got desk rejected, just right off the bat. And had I just taken the few hours it would have taken to refine the idea and send it to my advisor, he could have told me right away, oh, this is a waste of time. Don't waste months on this. And I could have. It would have been great. But I've learned since then. I say send it to a trusted colleague. There might be a temptation to send it to me. I pray you will not. I get so many emails every day from people I don't know from around the world asking for advice and feedback on their dissertations and on their papers. And I give as much as I can, but I have my own research I have to do. And so I limit myself to some extent. I answer about a couple dozen every day. And then I have to cut it off after about an hour. So if you are seeking advice on anything, please do just send something very concise. Again, don't send me your whole methods and findings and analysis section of your dissertation. Say, hey, what are your thoughts? I would appreciate if you don't do that. You have great advisors, leverage them. I advise my own set of about 24 doctoral students. Work with smart people, again, not me. Occasionally I'll have people invite me to their own research, and I appreciate that. I usually say no. Occasionally I say yes. I have a few co-authors right now who I said yes to because they had access to data that I couldn't get, and it was in an area that I was fascinated with. And they had already done a lot of the legwork. So if that is the case, yeah, feel free to send me an email, and I'll be pretty straightforward with you. I hope you'll forgive me. But do collaborate. I wish I had, before this meeting, counted the unique co-authors I've worked with. if I had to take a guess, I would have close to 100 unique co-authors, which is insane. With 142 pubs, that is a lot of different co-authors, and it's been a great benefit. They see things differently than I do. They see things differently than my doctoral advisor does, and they see things differently than my colleagues at my university do. And so it's great to work with a lot of different people. And often you'll get stuck with one set of collaborators, and you won't get moving, and you'll have some issues in the productivity process. So work with a lot of different people, have a lot of different projects on your plate. That's another thing. If you want to be a productive writer, it is unfortunately, to some extent, a numbers game. Oh, there we go. I just muted you. Oh, there we go again. Sorry, somebody's coming through too loud. It says it's coming from Islam. There we go. That fixed it, maybe. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, even though I have a lot of publications, I've had a lot of rejections and a lot of submissions, at least double the number of submissions. If I'm publishing once every 3 weeks, I'm submitting a couple times every 3 weeks, which may sound impossible, but it's not if you collaborate with a lot of people. So right now, I probably have 20 active research projects going on, maybe more. But I still only work 30 hours a week. You just prioritize and you focus. You delegate the things you don't need to do, don't do. Have a research assistant do it, or have a colleague who maybe is less senior than you do it. If you are the junior colleague, you might have a lot of work to do. And then you can look forward to being a senior co-author. And here's something that might be a little, this is a piece of advice I didn't take seriously as a junior scholar. Now that I'm a little bit more seasoned, I realize that editors-in-chief and senior editors don't mind if you send them a snippet and get their feedback. Before I ever submit to a journal, ever, I always submit to the editor-in-chief or a senior editor at that journal first. I don't send them my whole paper. I send them a bullet point abstract, essentially. Essentially, those 6 questions is what I send them. And I get their feedback and say, hey, is this an appropriate fit for your journal? Or is this something that your journal would be interested in? And usually, 60-ish% of the time, they say, no, I'm not interested in this. This is not something I'd be interested in, but you could take it to this journal, and they would probably be interested. So that saves me months of submission and waiting for review. And if it does get through a lazy editor who doesn't look at it and just sends it out to reviewers, that's another few months, and then it gets rejected. So that's terrible. Just get that feedback within a week, and then you haven't wasted your time. You might be afraid to do this, and that's totally cool. That's why you collaborate with more senior scholars. Have the most senior or most influential or well-known scholar on your team send that email. And those editors-in-chief, those senior editors will usually respond, especially if they make it a short email that is easy to digest. And those are all my slides. This is just my shameless plug for my educator course. I created an online structural equation modeling course. If you haven't seen it, there's the link. It goes through the whole SEM process. So anyway, I'm up for questions, or comments, or thoughts. Hopefully your microphones work. If it ends up not working, we can do it through chat, and I'll talk and you can chat. But try microphone first. Everyone is so humble. No questions.
Hello, can I ask, Prof?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Could you please talk to us more about experimental design, about the research about using experimental design
Yeah.
method, because gathering data, I have a problem because sometimes gathering data to make manipulation checks and other data to measure the dependent value. So could you please tell us or recommend us a paper talk more in detail about experimental 2x2x2 or 2x2 factorial
Let me share my
subjective
screen
design?
again. Yeah, let me share my screen again, and I'll take you to a website, or I'll take you to a reference. Let's see this screen.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Let's see. Escape. Let me go to internet, and I'll take you to the StatWiki. So for those who don't know, I created something called the StatWiki. I put a lot of statistics stuff here, but I also put some general guidelines and some references. If you go to the references page, and I'm going to just search for experiment. Here it is. Shadish, Cook, and Campbell. This is considered sort of the, oh, sorry, whoa. Ah! I'll find it again in just a minute. There we go. Shadish, Cook, and Campbell. This is considered the textbook for experimental design. They very clearly break it down if you're doing 2x2s or 2x3s or 2x2x2 or however you want to do it. They break down all the different things you need to consider. So that's a great reference for experimental design.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Somebody asked in the text, how can we fill a methodological gap? This is actually what I did for my dissertation. I found that there was a gap in how we study things, especially when you try to merge qualitative and quantitative. I found there's really a gap there. So the way to fill a methodological gap is the same way as I show in the slides. You have to, go back to the top here, you have to say that there is a problem. What is the problem? We are unable to study things the way we need to, or with precision, or something like that, some way that a method would fix. And then why is this an important problem? Well, because we can't think and design theories and find good findings using the current methods. And who else has addressed this? Well, in this case, it's the other methods. How is this method not complete? How is that method not complete? What is it these methods can't do? Which is also number 4 here. And then you can say, now look, we need a new method to study these different phenomena. That's how you motivate a method piece. Let's see, how can you improve your writing skills? By writing. I know that's terrible. And by reviewing. Sorry, I'll bring this up here so everybody can see it. So somebody asked in the chat, how can we improve writing skills? By writing with others, definitely. Collaborating, you'll see other people correct your writing, which has helped me in the past. By submitting research, and there was one other. Oh, by reviewing. When you review other people's papers, you start to find what they are lacking in a pattern, and you find that you will then avoid those mistakes in your writing by reviewing others. Can we get the recording? Yes, I will share this recording on the StatWiki. I'll show you where in just a moment. Other questions? Will I share?
Can I ask
Have you
something?
authored a meta-analysis paper? Ooh, I don't think so. Well, yeah, slightly, yes. It was more of a meta-lit review. We were looking at who had studied all this different topic from every angle, and we did an analysis of their findings, so sort of meta-analysis. I don't remember, was it in ISJ? I don't remember where it was, but let me do this. If we go to Scholar and we look for James Gaskin, there he is, user profiles. Inside here, you'll find all the research I've done, and the one I'm thinking of, if it ever loads, hello, there we go. The one I'm thinking of was with Carlo, not on my first page. So the person who asked, let's see, Control F, Carlo, here it is. So early versus late adoption of this stuff in ISJ. This is the one. I can just copy this link. So whoever asked that, here is a response. Nope, that's not the link. Oops. I have to click on it, and then can I click on it? And here it is. I'll post this link in the chat window. There you go. Okay, let's see. Oh, whoops, that was a private one. To everyone, there we go. Let's go back up to these questions.
Can I ask something?
Of course.
How can I know that I have been through all the literature that is talking about my problem?
You can't.
Like, I haven't. I can't, because like I've recently, currently I'm writing a proposal for research. I'm a master's student, and every time like I check the internet, I find a paper that wasn't you know, seen before. I didn't see it before. How can I know that I've been like at least like 90%
You
among
can't,
all the?
but what you can do to mitigate the problem is share it with another collaborator. Share it with somebody who's not part of that research, share it with an expert, and they'll say, oh, well, have you read this paper? That always happens to me. I always miss something. And it's better for your co-authors or for your colleagues to catch that before the editor or reviewer catches it.
Okay, what can I do if I started with something and I thought that no one is working on this area, and during my research, a research pops out or someone shared the same idea or the same point?
Yeah, this happens quite often. You can continue to pursue it if you have a particular gap that it hasn't been covered. If it's something that's totally been covered and you have no new insights on it, then it's time to shift to a new problem.
Okay, thank you.
It feels like a waste of time, but there's the theory of sunk costs, right? You don't want to keep digging yourself deeper.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Professor, can I ask a question?
Of course, yes.
Okay. I want to know.
Can you come closer to your microphone? I can't hear you.
I said in your presentation, you said an old problem that has been addressed, an old problem. But
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You might have to post it in the chat window.
Can you hear me?
Only barely.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. My question is, in your presentation, you made mention that an old problem that had been addressed, I mean, it's not worth doing research in. But I want to find out.
Thoroughly resolved, yes. If it has been thoroughly addressed and you're not adding any new information.
Okay, but let's say you have a persistent, like it is an old problem though, but it's still persistent. It's still, even though research has been done in it, but the problem is still, ongoing. So is it not worth looking at such a thing?
Yes, there are many problems like that are ongoing that no matter how much research is done, you never resolve. And if you're going to pursue a problem like that, then the best thing to do is find a way to contribute new information, which is possible, definitely. But if you're unable to contribute new information, that's when I would say, find a different problem. Okay. Let's see, which handbooks, guidelines, or platforms do you use to improve your research and writing? Maybe this is conceited of me, I don't, or arrogant of me. I don't use different platforms or research tools to improve my writing. I just write. I write a lot. And that's what improves my writing. Yeah. Let's see. Someone asks, I am working in developing a construct. I need your suggestions how to theorize the construct and develop a model that is feasible in my context. I'm planning to develop a scale. There's not a developed scale for that construct. I need some suggestions. Okay, yeah, scale development is a big issue. See, because, oops, there we go. Because reading whole paper is very cumbersome and time consuming right now. I'm in post-proposal phase and trying to write some review. All right, so yeah, validating measures is that is a very important process. I have some references on that, I think, on scale development. Let's see if it's here listed. Maybe not. Ooh, let's see, scale. Here it is, scale development, develops, right here. That's the one. So look into that one. That's a good one. Oops. All right, then this one. My question is, if I repeat an idea of research in my local context, is it enough? Right, so this happens a lot. There's a general research question that has been studied, and then we say, let's study it in my specific context, Malaysian education, or in Iranian government, or something like that. And the question you need to ask yourself is your context sufficiently different to require new theories? Are the theories that are already out there not good enough to explain the phenomenon in your context? And sometimes the answer is no, they're not good enough, and we need new theory for more specific context. But usually the answer is they're good enough. Let's see, are there biases in publication of papers? Obviously, yes. I ask you, some papers delay so much that they're out of novelty. Yeah, definitely. There's politics in publishing, definitely. One of the papers that I just had rejected this week, definitely there was some politics involved. I won't get into it on recording, but yes, it happens, unfortunately. Let's see, do you have interest in multi-level SEM? Multi-level SEM as in like student, teacher, school, district, things like that. Me, not so much. I haven't done a lot of research in that area, and that's why I don't have many videos or tutorials in that area. So no, I don't have much interest there. Mediated moderation, I have a few videos on that, but I'm not very interested. It's too complex, too convoluted for me. My brain likes to keep things simple. Let's see, how do you decide if the construct should be unidimensional construct or higher order? Oh, good question. So generally speaking, multidimensional constructs are rich. They're richer. They capture more variants of the trait or the construct you're interested in measuring. That being said, they are harder to analyze. So it's this sort of balance between richness and simplicity. Some constructs can be measured very simply, simple constructs, but more complicated ones, take for example, leadership quality. Leadership quality cannot be measured unidimensionally, at least not effectively. It's too rich, it's too multidimensional. And so you have to choose a multidimensional approach. After EFA, we want to do CFA. Should I use the same data or new data? Ooh, this is a debate in the literature. The debate is largely settled, but it is considered more rigorous to do EFA and CFA on separate data sets, or at least random samples of the same data set using different data. You randomly sample and then you take the remainder and use that for the CFA. But most of us don't have that luxury. Most of us are limited by sample size and just don't have enough. And so it is commonly accepted to use the same data, even though it's more rigorous to use separate data. Let's see, next question. Are you aware of any step-by-step guidelines for determining dimensionality of constructs? Oh, determining the dimensionality of constructs statistically is done through an EFA, exploratory factor analysis. Conceptually, it's done through what's called a Q sort or card sort. That's where you have all of your measures from to measure that construct, and you present them to a respondent, and you have them sort those measures into buckets or categories or dimensions. And the way they sort them will reveal their dimensions. So if they sort, let's say you have 10 measures for a construct, if they sort them into 3 piles, each of those piles probably measure a different dimension of that construct. That's the Q-sort method. Let's see, another question. How do we get new how do we present new theory? How doing we get present a new theory got from a study conducted in a different environment? Oh, yeah, adapting theories from other fields into our own field. That is high value, often easy to publish. So how do you do it? Just do. Well, I don't know if I have an answer to this one. You try to find the connections between that theory outside of the original context and inside of your context. I don't know that I have a more specific response to that. You just try to find those connections. Sorry. Can we formulate research hypothesis if my sample is not a random sample? Oh, yeah, that's another debate in the literature. Do we always have to have random? The answer is it's more rigorous. Yes, definitely more rigorous to have random for various statistical reasons. It helps filter out error, unnecessary error. But it's not always feasible. Those of you who do experimental research, you know this. It's hard to get random, truly random samples. And so when possible, you randomize the dimensions that you can randomize. So if you have any control over who gets which treatments, randomize it. If it's a survey, you can't really randomize, you're just getting what you get. So, no. Let's see.
Can I say
yes,
my question, please?
Of course.
Sir, first of all, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Thank you, sir. Sir, my question is related when it comes to publishing in high-ranking journals. Sir,
yes.
I am in my early stages of publication, but sir, my what can I say? My headache point or my biggest challenges when it comes to the contribution. The matter of contributions, it's a pain in the pack, sir. Sir, finally, we are just scholars. We are not that much thinker like Alton Mayo or XYZ theory or something like that. So, I mean, what is your comment in this area?
Are you speaking about scientific contribution or personal contribution to the paper?
Yes, sir. I mean the contribution or novelty of the paper, as long as my research is concerned.
So often it's very difficult to dispute contribution when 2 things occur. The first is when you can answer these first 4 questions effectively. That's one way to establish contribution, or the first part of it. The second part is your findings. Assuming you've established these first 4 questions and you've motivated your research, so it's obviously important research, then what you find then has to inform that research question. And if you inform an important research question, by definition, you are contributing to science. So those 2 parts.
Sorry, sir, but from personal experience, I have did a novelty contribution to my specific country, but as the editor-in-chief, his reply for me that it's not means that much of contribution. Although it is a novelty, it has been a first time to done in such area, in such country, in such sector, but they have made an excuse for me. I don't know.
Right. So in that case where you're trying to contribute through contextual research, as was asked before, you have to justify that your context is sufficiently unique that new research must be done. If the old research that is more general, not context specific, is not applicable, then that has to be argued and explained effectively. Otherwise, the editor will say, well, what's new? Why not just rely on this old research? What is so unique about your context that we need new research? So you just have to motivate your context.
Yes, I mean, reaching to this point, what should, how to reach to this level of what is auditor saying? As you mentioned that he will definitely say what is the so what is the new? It's already done. Okay, Professor James, thank you. Also, you are so young to be a professor, and
just look young. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I'm not so young.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Let's see. There was another question up here. What would be your advice for early researcher on minimizing the effect of publication bias for their manuscripts? Oh, okay. Here's a bit of advice that's going to come off politically incorrect. There is advantage to publishing with well-known scholars. So get to know them and publish with them. This is going to sound really bad, but I've had people ask me to co-author with them so that my name will be on the paper. I still contribute. I'm not just getting free publications, but I've been asked to be on a paper so that it will get published. Because when an editor-in-chief sees a name that the editor recognizes, they're more likely to give it a chance. And I know that's wrong and it's unfair and it's stupid, but it's human. And that is the unfortunate side of publishing right now. One of the unfortunate sides of publishing is that it's not completely unbiased. And when an editor sees a name that they recognize, they will give it a chance.
What other sides, please, Professor James?
Oh, there's so many different biases in politics in publishing. Yeah,
tell us some secrets.
Yeah, one of the most annoying is just luck of the draw. I remember, so we submitted a paper to a conference and it got rejected. We submitted the same unchanged paper to a journal and it got accepted because of the luck of the draw of the reviewer team. The reviewers at the conference didn't like it. The reviewers at the journal loved it. Same paper. So that's one. We don't have super smart AI evaluating our papers. It's humans. We're very flawed. Let's see. So my answer to that question on chat was try to co-author with well-known scholars. Not only do you benefit from name recognition, but also you benefit from their experience. They've published a lot, so they know a lot. They've experienced a lot. So that will benefit your paper. Can one use SEM for secondary data? Yes, I've done it many times. I use the World Bank data for several of my studies. That is a lot of archival secondary data. Is it possible to publish a paper about adaptation of questionnaires or instrument to different contexts? Very rarely is that publishable. The only times that is publishable is when it's a very popular scale, something like the big 5 personality traits, or some methodological thing like social desirability bias, something that everybody's using. You might be able to get a local context contextualization published, but it's risky. Let's see. A little more towards SEM. James, would it be possible to explain the difference between reflective, formative composites in an easy to comprehend way for non-statisticians? Yeah, formative versus reflective. Reflective is unidimensional. You're asking the same thing in different words. Formative is every question you ask is about a different aspect of the construct. So in reflective, all those measures that are the same, they're interchangeable. They are highly correlated. You answer one strongly agree, you're going to answer all of them strongly agree or close to it. With formative, since you're asking about different aspects or dimensions of the construct, you can answer strongly agree to one, strongly disagree to another. They don't have to be correlated. That's formative. There's a lot more to that. And I talk about it in my course. I have a whole page on it in my course. You're welcome to check it out, or on the wiki for free. Can you cut Christopher's mic, please? Oh, sorry, didn't see that till later. Thank you for a great presentation. Is it better to choose a simple research point or a complicated one? Oh, definitely simple. Keep it simple. Editors like simple. Reviewers like simple. You can always make it more complicated if they want more, but it's hard to make it simpler after you made it so convoluted. And it's hard to get it past the first round if it's too convoluted. I will often submit a simple paper that's not even fully like fleshed out, just to get the idea through the process. And if they like the idea, they'll ask me to write more. Obviously, I submit completed papers, but they're not perfect, and they're not the full arguments. It's just getting the idea through. Let's see, sharing the slides. Yes, these are on the StatWiki. Lots of emails. Thank you, thank you. Let's see. They will be, you know, I'll send them to Walid and he can post them on that Facebook group. A statistics question. In a CFA, 20 new messages, oh boy. We might have to cut this at some point. If in a CFA, the correlations are very low, 0.05 to 16, when we work on a second order model under these conditions, the results will remain the same. Not necessarily. Those correlations depend on the underlying measures, and you add a second order factor, the measures slightly change. It'll be pretty consistent, but there will be slight differences. Is it possible to publish a review article if I haven't published anything before? First part of that, yes. In fact, quite often young scholars, their first articles published are review papers because they need to start from somewhere. They need to review the literature. And when they review the literature, often they find something new that they hadn't found, that hadn't been discovered before. What are the key advices you can share to publish something like that? It all boils back to these 4 questions. If you're gonna publish something, even a review paper, you gotta say what the problem is. And for a review paper, it's usually that there's something missing from the body of literature. There's something missing that is also important. So that's how you do a review paper. Let's see, lots of emails. I've submitted a paper. It's been 9 months. Oh, and no reply. Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up. You've emailed the editor, but no response. Oh, terrible editor. Okay, I have been in this position where I've submitted a paper and it's been 6 months or so, and I have heard nothing. In that case, you email them. You said you have emailed them and no effect. So if that's the case, find a co-author who is more senior and have them email them. And if that doesn't work, then you might email the managing editor. So there's the editor-in-chief who's over all the papers, but there's also a managing editor. That's the person who takes care of like proofing and structuring and organizing the papers and getting them published. That person has the ear of the editor-in-chief. And so if you're not getting a response from the editor-in-chief, email the managing editor and they will email the editor-in-chief and then you'll get a response. Hope that helps. Good question. Can you please do a video on how to use SEM in secondary data? Oh, maybe. The principles are the same. The problem is with secondary data, there's a lot of stuff that comes before SEM that must be done. But once you get to the SEM part, it's all the same. But the stuff that has to be done before is all the cleaning. Since you didn't design that data set, you need to clean it extensively and remove the variables that are not of interest. And when you do an EFA, there's going to be a lot of mess. So you have to give a lot of attention to the EFA. But other than that, the principles are the same. Impact factor of journal. This issue, it depends on what university you work for and if you plan to stay. Any high-ranking university will only want high-impact journals. They will only count that. For me, for example, I'm at the Marriott School of Management in BYU. It is a top business school in the world. And if I publish in a sort of tier 2 low impact factor journal, it counts for nothing, not one bit. If it's not a top journal, it doesn't count. So, but that's my institution. A few of my co-authors are at other institutions who are sort of lower tier research wise, and they can publish in almost any journal and it counts for something. So it really depends on your institution. And I mentioned it depends on whether you want to stay. So the institution you're at right now might not value or might value, let's say they do value lower tier publications. But if you want to move up to a different higher institution, get more pay, those journal publications might not count. So, but they're easier to get. It's a balance. And I know if you're at a lower tier organization, you teach more, and so you have less time to research. So that becomes a tricky balance. Is it possible to publish paper using basic statistics only? Oh, definitely. Like chi-squares, regressions, correlations, definitely. You do not need SEM or latent growth curve models or anything like that to publish a good paper, especially if it's experimental. You just need ANOVAs and t-tests for experimental stuff. So definitely.
Please,
Yes.
can I ask this last question?
Yes.
Yes, I'm as a starter. How did I know that this is a good journal? Considering these predatory journals out there, what are the things to look out for when making a publication in terms of the journal to choose?
Yeah, so if typically there's a list of journals kept by your university, and it's the list of journals that they value. But if you don't have something like that, or if it's outside of your own field, you can go to Google Scholar, and then over on the left here, there's metrics. Hopefully you can still see my screen. If you go to metrics, it has all the journals and their H indexes. So if I search for some journal, like let's say renewable, something like that. I don't know. Here's a renewable energy journal. Is it a good journal? Yes. Look at that impact factor, the H index. That's very good. Anything over about 50 is pretty good. Anything above 30 is middling. Anything less than 30, and you're going to have to justify why you published there. So that's a good resource. There's also SJR, is that right? Schemago. Yeah, Schemago. They rank all journals. So if I did renewable energy in this one, here it is right here out of the United Kingdom. And here's its H index and other things like impact factor. So this is one way to justify the value of the journal. Okay, let's see. In special issue, who is responsible for accepting and rejecting the article? In a special issue, it's the senior editor over that special issue. So every special issue has a guest senior editor if they're not already on the editorial board. And so that senior editor or team of senior editors for that special issue, they are responsible for accepting or rejecting your article. Is methodology important for review paper? It depends on what you're doing. Review papers often take the form of meta-analyses. And in that case, yeah, methodology is really important. But if you're just reviewing and describing the state of the art in the research, you might not need to do a meta-analysis. Did you already use exploratory SEM for transcultural adaptation of scale? I have. Did you see this method in place of EFA? No, I haven't. Usually adapting scales, you need to do an EFA to validate it in your context. Oh, I think we're at the bottom. Oh, I hit the bottom of the chat window. That's amazing. All right, it has been over an hour.